Boxing truth here. All right, let's talk about this funny situation in the light heavyweight division. There's a lot of rumblings that Adonis Stevenson and Badou Jack is not going to happen. Bob Arum stated in an interview that he honestly thinks the fight's not going to happen, and it's because Eleider Alvarez withdrew from the purse bid to fight Alexander Gavatsvik, since it was reported that he steps aside for how many number of times, and as a result, the consequence is that he has to fight for his mandatory position, which is the next guy after him, Alexander Gavatsvik, if he wants to keep his mandatory position. But the funny thing is, he pulled out of the purse bid immediately to fight Gavatsvik. Eleider Alvarez did. So everyone's wondering, is this Adonis Stevenson Badou Jack fight going to happen? Now, Bob Arum is stating in a recent interview he doesn't think it's going to happen because since Eleider Alvarez pulled out, which was kind of weird, but also his position in the WC rankings has not changed. He's still number one for some strange reason in the WC rankings. He should be ousted if he was not willing to defend his mandatory position by fighting Alexander Gavatsvik. So we'll find out tomorrow if this fight's going to happen. I hope it's not true. I hope Adonis Stevenson is fighting Badou Jack. It's a good fight. Definitely want to see that fight. But the reason why it might not happen is because Alvarez pulled out against Gavatsvik and he's still rated number one. So now Gavatsvik is going to fight for the interim title against this Frenchman guy. But the thing is, when you read the WBC's rules, the funny thing about interim titles, and I'll read it says it right here. In its sole discretion, WBC will determine the timing and terms of a bout between a champion and interim champion to determine a sole champion in the division. So even though Gavatsvik's fighting for the interim title, it doesn't mean he is the official, the designated mandatory challenger. He's gonna have to wait for the WBC's ruling on when the timing and terms of a bout shall be agreed upon to determine a sole WBC champion in the division. So fighting for the interim title doesn't mean you're going to be the mandatory. You have to wait for the WBC's ruling on when you're going to fight the full WBC champion. So the play here that some in the industry are anticipating is that in order to avoid Gavatsvik for at least another 12 months, they're going to make Alvarez pull out of the purse bid, and then Stevenson finally fights Alvarez, and then the WBC will grant that as the mandatory fight, since Stevenson hasn't fought a mandatory in almost 5 years? It's been a long fucking time. And then the WBC will approve it as a mandatory, and then Stevenson's mandatory obligation will be fulfilled, and Gavatsvik will have to wait at least another year, at least another 9-month period to get his hands on Adonis Stevenson, since the mandatory will be fulfilled. That's what Bob Arum is thinking, and that's very possibly could be the case. I mean, I get it. Stevenson, if he fights Alvarez, it will fulfill the mandatory obligation, and then he could fight Badou Jack after that in the voluntary stage, since his mandatory obligation will be fulfilled, and then he can push Gavatsvik to the side for at least 9 to 12 months, since the mandatory will be fulfilled. But if he fights Badou Jack next, Adonis Stevenson, then his mandatory will not be fulfilled. It won't be obligated. It won't be fulfilled, I mean. So that means Gavatsvik will get his shot a lot sooner rather than later. For instance, if Stevenson fights Alvarez first, and then he's going to be able to fight Badou Jack after that. But if he fights Badou Jack next, he's going to have to fight his mandatory after that, which could be Alexander Gavatsvik. And for some, we all know that Heyman fighters steer clear from, fighters outside of their realm. You see Alvarez pulling out of purse bids, Peter Quillen vacating his titles to avoid fighters outside of the PBC realm. It's happened numerous times. Broner turning down a Pacquiao fight. Danny Garcia turned down a Pacquiao fight. Marcus Brown pulled out of an eliminator to fight Kovacevic. He was offered a shot to fight Kovalev, and he turned it down. So these Heyman fighters, PBC fighters, have been reportedly turned down a bunch of fights when it doesn't include fighters inside their realm. When they get offered fights against a top-ranked fighter or a Rock Nation fighter or a Golden Boy fighter, a lot of the time they don't go through with the fight. So we'll find out tomorrow. I hope Stevenson just fights Badou Jack, and then he fights Kovacevic after that. So the fuck what? But the agenda here might be that to avoid Kovacevic a lot further, fight Alvarez first, then fight Badou Jack after that next, and then keep Kovacevic waiting for his title shot. Since being an interim champion doesn't mean you're the designated mandatory challenger. So we'll see how this plays out tomorrow. If it's Stevenson Badou Jack, I mean that's the play I'm hoping for. I'd rather see that fight first than Alvarez. Alvarez just doesn't do much for me. He steps aside so many times, pulled out the purse bid with Kovacevic, and he's still rated number 1 by WC. So possibly Stevenson's gonna fight Alvarez first to fulfill his mandatory obligation in order to push aside Kovacevic and keep him waiting for his title shot. So it's a crazy situation, funny situation. In the light heavyweight division, the WC rankings, Stevenson is just his bullshit. His team not fulfilling the mandatory for all this time. Alvarez is also to blame. And Badou Jack, he should be, he's willing to fight him. So we'll find out tomorrow the truth on who Adonis Stevenson is fighting, but I don't know. I really don't know if he's going to fight Badou Jack next. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.